Thanks for tuning in to SLCtv, Salt Lake City's government access channel. Fall is upon us and there are so many beautiful places in the city to enjoy the changing of the leaves, like this beautiful garden that I'm standing in. For this week's episode of Capital City News, we hear from Nick Norris, Planning Director of Salt Lake City, about accessory dwelling units. And our History Minute is about the iconic Boston and Newhouse buildings. Let's get started with our look back. Current and future Salt Lake City HIVE Pass holders now get a free one-year GREENbike membership as part of an effort to help clear the air, get people out of their cars and moving. The HIVE Pass, a deeply discounted all-in-one transit pass, offers SLC residents unlimited access to bus, rail, streetcar services, and bike share for only $42 per month. Sign up and get your Ride with HIVE Pass today. For details, visit ridewithhive.com. The city's biggest roadway construction project of the year is now complete. City officials, community, and project team members marked the completion of the Gladiola Street Reconstruction project. Over 3,000 vehicles, mainly semi-trucks, use Gladiola Street daily. The reconstruction project was designed to handle travel demand for the next 50 years and includes an additional lane in each direction, sidewalks, ADA ramps, bike lanes, and more. It took almost a decade, but accessory dwelling units, also known as mother-in-law apartments, are now allowed to operate in the city. Nick Norris, the city's planning director, further explains.
An ADU stands for accessory dwelling unit. They're generally small apartments, backyard cottages, living space over garages that can be used as housing units. Historically, dating way back decades, the city allowed multiple ADUs on properties and apartments, backyard cottages, etc. And then beginning probably in the 50s, the city started to put regulations in place that made it difficult to build those or impossible. Back in, I believe it was 2010, we actually adopted an ADU ordinance, but they were only allowed near track stations. And so it was very limited in where they could go, and we only saw 2 or 3, maybe 4 ADUs constructed since then. So about 4 or 5 years ago, we started to look at that ordinance to try to figure out how we could improve it. In October, the City Council adopted a new updated ADU ordinance that allows them citywide. So the ordinance authorizes people to build an ADU. They can build them in their existing house as a basement, back rooms, additions, provided they comply with zoning. They can also build them in buildings that are in a backyard, over a garage, attached to a garage as a standalone building. And there's regulations that deal with the scale of that to help make sure that they fit into the neighborhood and help them reduce the impacts. So they have to be set back a certain distance from property lines. They can't be over a certain height. They have to provide parking unless there's parking on the street available in front of the house, in front of the property. Or if they're within a quarter mile of a bus stop or a tracks or streetcar station. An ADU is allowed citywide. On every property you could build an ADU. Some of the criteria are there's a maximum lot coverage of all the buildings added together based on the square footage, the footprint. So in some zones that ranges from 40 to 50%. And so if you're exceeding that already, you would not be able to add an ADU, but if most properties in the city are under that, so they would have the ability to add an ADU. There's special regulations that allow the ADU in addition to a garage or shed that may already exist on the property, so that you don't necessarily run into conflicts with being able to meet those kinds of needs that properties have. There's setback requirements, so they have to be, if they're single story like the one behind us, they can be as close to 4 feet from a property line. If they add a second story, then they end up having to be 10 feet. There's entrance requirements and things like that, all aimed at helping make sure that they fit into their surroundings and they reduce any kind of impact that may be created by the building itself. So for the future of Salt Lake City, it mainly means that we can better adapt to housing needs as our demographics change. When you get to be a certain age or a certain level of health, even if you're not old, sometimes it's difficult to take care of a property and to stay in the neighborhood. You know, I think from a planning perspective, when we talk about character of a neighborhood, it all starts with the residents. The residents are the character of the neighborhood. The buildings kind of supplement that. And so the more that we can maintain that type of character and give people options to stay in their neighborhood as their lifestyle changes, then we want to make sure that we have that flexibility to do that. The other thing that ADUs do is that they allow for more opportunity for people to live in neighborhoods that they may not otherwise be able to afford to live in. And so if you have a young family and school-age kids that maybe you can't afford a place to live, ADUs provide options that might be able to help reduce that impact and improve the affordability of housing. The easiest place to go is slc.gov/planning. We'll be putting up a user guide as soon as it's ready that will provide a simple how-to. And also for those people who may see an ADU pop up next door to them, so they can kind of understand the process, what to expect, and what they can do if they do end up having some issues with an ADU next door.
Next up is our History Minute.
The Boston and Newhouse buildings have figured prominently in the Salt Lake City skyline since construction began on them in 1907. When they were built, they were named the first skyscrapers in Utah, though they're nowhere near the size of what we call skyscrapers today. They were built by mining magnate Samuel Newhouse. Samuel Newhouse set out to create an industrial power center on the south end of town as a counterpoint to the influence of the LDS Church in the north. This would be a financial center in Salt Lake City to rival any in the world. In 1906, Newhouse hired the Chicago-New York architect Henry Ives Cobb to design the buildings, and they began construction in 1907. These twin 11-story buildings were both steel-framed, stone-faced, and fireproof. The buildings were exactly what Newhouse wanted them to be, but financial disaster struck. Shortly before World War I, his fortunes unraveled, and he was forced to declare bankruptcy. Newhouse left the United States and spent the rest of his days in a French chateau with his sister, trying to regain his lost fortunes.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of Capital City News. November 6th is Election Day. Be sure to get to a polling location nearest you and get out the vote. For SLCtv, I'm Poonam Kumar signing off from the Greater Avenues neighborhood.